friends, I want to do a quick and brief video that reviews the topic area. Now remember, area is something we covered in marking period 2, but I know you guys are super smart, and as soon as I go over this, you're going to be like, click, I remember all about area. Now remember, area is how much space is covering a particular region or shape. And usually area is the number of unit squares that are needed to cover that particular shape or region with no gaps. Remember, you can't do any gaps or overlap. You can't, lay something on top of something else. That's what it means to overlap something. Now, remember, unit square is what we use to measure area. A lot of times we might measure in inches, so it might be 1 square inch. But if there's something that's not labeled there, then we measure it by 1 square unit. And it's a square with sides that are each 1 unit long, and it has an area of 1 square unit. There's 2 different ways that you can measure area. And if you look at your packet, this is covering page 69 and page 70 in your packet number 2. So if you're looking at that, it's asking you at the bottom, are these shapes showing exact amount or an estimate? Kind of like an educated guess. Like, what do you think it's around? So I want to go over exact amount. Now, exact amount is when it shows that you can count them exactly. You all get the same answer. There's no wiggle room. You can go ahead and count each little square one by one. And a lot of the times when I'm counting, I like to mark it with like a little dot. Then I know I counted it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you notice, the exact square is covered. Sometimes it can be completely covered, or that you have halves being covered as well. Those will give you the exact amount. Now, if I kept counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and continue to count all of my squares, then I would know that I have exactly 36 units covered, meaning my answer would be 36 square units. Remember, 36 square units. Sometimes you might write it as like 36, and instead of writing the complete square, I like to do SQ, and then I put the little dot, and then I would write the word units. Okay? Now, what happens if they aren't completely filled in or halves? Then it might be an estimate. Okay, you might have to estimate the area, which means you can combine partially filled. What's partially filled mean? Partially means not all of the way. If you look at this down here, it means that it's not all of the way filled in. So you can combine partially filled squares to then estimate what you think that exact amount is. Now, if you're doing something like this, something I always stress is always count the full ones first, meaning completely filled in. So 1, 2, I would cover all the ones. 3, even this one right here, it's pretty close, but I'm not going to count that one. 4, and you would go all the way, and then you would start combining these. So maybe these 2 would then equal 1. So you're going to get a kind of good guess. Now, there's something different here when you write your answer. This you can write exactly 36 squared units. You know that this one was 36 squared. It was an exact amount. This one, if you notice, this is partially filled in. It's not even exactly a half. Look at this little dot right here. Look at this one. Okay, some of them have a little bit. It's not all the way filled in, which means partially. So this area is about, that's a key word, about 27 unit squares, or about 27 square units. So that's what you would write there. It's about 27 squared units, okay? That keyword is about. You don't have an exact amount, so you're kind of judging or estimating this. So you would write the word, this is an estimate, and then you're trying to guess what the closest number would be. Now let's do some practice with this. Practice time. We're going to figure out if you can find the exact area, or is it an estimate, and what would that area be? Is it exactly 36 squared units, or is it about 27 squared units? So let's take some time to practice this. Take a look at this shape. You're looking at the blocks that are filled in. Would this be an exact guess on area, or not an exact guess, but would it be an exact amount? I'm sorry, or an estimate, a guess on how much is being covered? Go ahead and shout it out. You should have shouted out the word exact. You can figure out the exact amount because all of the unit squares are colored in. So see if you can figure out how much this would be. What is the area of this region? I'm going to go ahead and count with you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. If you said 12, you were correct. This shows 12 squared units. If you notice, all of the unit squares are colored in, so I know it's an exact amount. What do you think about this particular region? Do you think this is exact or estimate? Go ahead and shout it out. You should have shouted estimate. You're estimating the amount that's being colored. Now, or covered, colored in, shaded, the area of this shape. I'm going to go ahead and remember, if you remember that little trick I taught you, I'm going to put a dot on all the exact ones. Now, if you don't want to put a dot and you actually want to write the number, you can do that too. So 1, 2, I'm only, if you notice I skipped some, that's because I don't want to do the shapes yet that have spaces. 3, 4, I know these are full squares. 5, 6. Now, I noticed these two look pretty close to half, so I'm actually going to join those two and make that 7. I'm going to do the same over here. 8. Now, I'm getting kind of, I noticed like this is more of a half. I'm actually going to take this and do a 9, a 10, and the reason I'm doing that, 11. I'm going to use this one to cover these. So I use these little parts of this to cover this one. So I've used this one. 11, let's see, 12. I'm going to do 13. And I'm going to do a 14. I'm going to kind of cross out that other one because I'm going to use this to have covered this little space, and this one. I'm going to cross that out. So I'm going to estimate that it's about 14 square units. Now you could have rounded or done something a little bit different, but as long as you realize to always count the full ones first, maybe you combine different ones and realize it's about 14 squared units. Some of you might have gotten 13, some of you might have gotten 15, right around that. If you got somewhere around 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 range, you're doing okay. Remember, you're estimating, you're making that educational guess, as long as you can support where you got that rough guess, that estimate. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Now, is this region exact or an estimate? Think about what I told you on the earlier screen. And if you look down here, remember we learned earlier that 2 halves, 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1 whole. Do you think this is an exact amount or an estimate? This is, oh, I put equal, silly me. This is an exact amount. You can figure out the exact amount. That's what you should have shouted out. Now, if you have an exact amount, yes, I noticed that you have these 2 squares that aren't fully covered or, enclosed. That's still okay because I notice this is a complete half. Now, if you notice at the slide I said at the very beginning, you can do exact if the squares show completely covered or half covered. And that is what we have in this situation. We have halves. Okay, so I always start off by counting the wholes first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8. And I notice here I have a half and I have another half. I have 2 halves. And remember, 1/2 plus 1/2 equals a whole. So I'm going to add 8 plus my 1/2. And what does that leave me with? So what is my exact amount? Don't forget to put square units at the end. You should have came up with 9 squared units. Nice job. So just remember a few tips. Always count the whole square units first, then do the halves. Mark what you have already counted with either dots or numbers so you don't lose your place. And remember, 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1 whole. I hope this helped you with your area. If you have any questions, you can always reach out and ask.